Hello, hello. We have a great workshop planned for you today, all about managing SharePoint permissions. And we'll be talking about NITRO applications and how they relate to SharePoint permissions. But managing SharePoint permissions, just overall, I think this will be a good topic for everyone today. And before we kick things off, I just want to let everyone know we will be keeping this high level. If you do have something that you want to get into more specifically about NITRO applications, by all means, feel free to reach out to us directly and we'll be happy to spend some time with you and answer any questions. Also, feel free to ask questions today on this webinar. We're here for you, happy to answer those questions as we're working through. And lastly, this will be recorded. So we'll be uploading this to our YouTube channel as well as to our website. And so if you need to come back and reference it, by all means, it'll be here for you. And hopefully be a great reference for you moving forward as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our fantastic VP of Product Development, James Restivo. And he has a lot of great things to share with you all today.
All right, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Looks like I have some stragglers coming on now, so maybe we'll just kind of walk slow through the first slides here, and then we'll dig into the content of today. So just kind of give you a frame of reference, we're talking about managing the SharePoint permissions that are related to NITRO applications and or NITRO sites in general. So this hopefully will give you a lot of good insight into how to manage SharePoint permissions in general, but also how they specifically relate to Corcanion's applications and the NITRO applications that we sell. So hopefully you get a lot of good content. Like Krista said, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to pop them into that questions box. Happy to answer anything on the fly. And you know, I want to make sure you have the information you need. So if I'm going over anything too quickly, just let me know. Or if you have any questions about anything, I'm happy to jump back to it. I think we'll probably take close to the full hour here, but I'll try to leave some time for questions towards the end. Maybe not. I mean, we'll see how it goes, I guess. But I may get close to the full hour, but certainly feel free to ask questions as we go, because we may not have time for them at the very end of the session. All right, so it looks like we've got a few more folks coming in, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to start simply and talk about the basic structure of SharePoint, just to give you a good frame of reference. Some of you may be aware of this, some of you may be SharePoint experts, and bear with me, because not everyone on this call is, not everyone who's going to be watching this video is a SharePoint expert. So let's go through this at the base level and give you the kind of core concepts we're going to be talking about today and how it relates to NITRO. So on the screen right now, you should see a basic structure of SharePoint. And what this means is that you have a SharePoint tenant as related to your Office 365 subscription. And under that SharePoint tenant, you can have a number of different site collections, or sites, as Microsoft likes to call them. You're going to hear the word sites a lot. Microsoft loves to reuse terminology. You may be familiar with this with the recent Copilot rollout, where there's Copilot for 365, Copilot Studio, Copilot on things. They love to reuse names. So sites you're going to hear a lot. And just to kind of set the stage, you have the SharePoint tenant, which does have a root site, and then you're going to have different site collections under that tenant, and then you're going to have probably NITRO application or NITRO sites under that tenant as well as a site collection. But then you can take it a step further, and I'll show that on the next slide here with an example of what a tenant URL can look like. So we're going to start at the top level here. You have the tenant URL of, we're going to use Contoso as our example. That's the commonly used example with Microsoft content. You have the Contoso SharePoint.com site. That's at the top level. That is in itself a root site, so that is considered a root site collection. But then under that, you can have different site collections, like site/site collection A, whatever the name might be, site/site collection B, and then you might have your NITRO sites. But then under that, under this NITRO site collection, which you could have multiples if you have NITRO Studio Enterprise, or you might just have one if you're using one of our applications. You're going to have the NITRO applications site collection, but then under that, you might have specific NITRO sites like the NITRO Help Desk. And then if it's the Help Desk or the purchasing app, you might have the portal underneath that as well. So you have different levels at which you're interacting with SharePoint. And I'll mention this again, but one thing to note is that permissions, as is related to this conversation, follow the chain. So you can see the chain down, you have the root site, and then you have site collection A, site collection B, and then under that, well, really at the site collection level, you have a set of permissions, and then those permissions can be inherited down through the site. So this chain of sites here, where you have NITRO apps / NITRO help desk / portal, could have the same permissions depending on its parent, and we'll talk about that in a future slide as well. Some important terms we'll cover today, just kind of give you a sense of what we're going to be discussing. We're going to talk about Active Directory groups. There's security groups and distribution groups for Active Directory, but we're not going to worry about the distinction between the two. That's for a different webinar, and you can dig into that information through Microsoft's content as needed. But for our purposes today, we're just going to be talking generally about Active Directory groups. We're also going to talk about SharePoint groups. So SharePoint groups are how you identify which groups should have access to which content in SharePoint. We'll talk about more of that. Permission levels is another concept we'll talk about, where you have the different permission levels of like full control or contribute, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. And then also inheritance. So I mentioned that previously, where you have this inheritance concept of the parents inheriting down through the chain, or the children inheriting down from the parent sites of what the permissions should be. We can break inheritance, and we'll talk more about that. So digging into a little deeper with the Active Directory groups, you have, it's used for grouping multiple users together from the Active Directory. So at the Active Directory level, usually IT folks or people who have the access to do so will create your directory groups for different applications. This could be for applications within 365, or it could be for applications outside of 365. You have your Active Directory groups that basically security groups that group people together. So all IT staff are under one group, all HR staff are under another group, and they each have different permissions given to different applications. The Active Directory groups can be used directly with NITRO applications and NITRO sites, but only when you have the Active Directory API permissions enabled. And that's a special permission granted, usually from whoever the tenant admin is would have to grant that level of access. But NITRO should be able, if you want to use Active Directory groups, NITRO should be able to read the membership of that group to know that the person accessing the content in the NITRO application is supposed to be able to access that content. We're going to talk about SharePoint groups in a little more detail. Again, these are groups of users, but this is specific to SharePoint. So within SharePoint, you're going to have these different groups. These are not related to Active Directory. The Active Directory groups can be in the SharePoint groups. You'll see from this line here, but the SharePoint groups can also just be users directly added to those SharePoint groups. And those are specific to SharePoint, so they're not used outside of SharePoint typically, whereas Active Directory groups can be used outside of SharePoint. And again, just to note, if you're using Active Directory groups within SharePoint groups, we need to have that 80 API permission granted in order to read that. Now, I know 80, I'm using Active Directory 80, but Entra is really what it's called now. But again, Microsoft loves to change up their terminology. So when I say Active Directory, I'm referring to Entra ID in the 365 world. So just be aware of that. And then when you're creating a SharePoint site collection, you're going to have some default groups like owners, whatever the site name is owners, whatever the site name is members, and then whatever the site name is visitors. Each one of those will get their own permission level by default, which can be changed. So we'll talk about permission levels, which are applied to SharePoint groups. They can also be applied directly to Active Directory groups in the SharePoint permissions. I'll show that when I go through the permissions pages in SharePoint. But essentially, you probably want to manage most things through SharePoint groups, and this is for giving access to subsites, pages, items, whatever might be the SharePoint object that you want to give access to. The out-of-the-box levels that we have, again, are full control for the owners, which gives access to everything in the SharePoint site collection. Now, again, this is specific to the site collection, not necessarily all of SharePoint. So when we talk about full control, we're talking about access to that particular site collection only. Edit access is actually very similar to full control, but it's given to the members by default. And typically for NITRO applications, we're going to want to change that. And then again, for visitors, we're going to want to change it from read-only. So read-only permissions are given to visitors by default, but if you're, in the help desk scenario, if you're applying that for help desk end users, you're going to need to give them some different levels of permission. Inheritance. So this is where we're meaning that the SharePoint object that we're talking about, whether it's a subsite or an item, it's taking the same permissions that the parent has, and we can apply that across the board. It helps control everything within the chain with everything within that line, right? So you have the SharePoint site collection, then you have a site underneath that. Within that site, you have pages. Within that, you have lists as well, items within those lists. Each one of those can have its inheritance of permission from the parent, but also embedded in that is the ability to break that inheritance. So you can apply specific permissions directly or through NITRO workflows to say that a certain page or an item, or well, really items will have a specific permission. That could be documents as well in document libraries, that they'll have a different permission structure than what the parent site might have in it. We use that in some cases if you have HR staff perhaps that are dealing with HR issues. You might want to break inheritance on those HR items and have only the HR staff and the person submitting that item have access to it, in which case you're going to want to create a workflow to break that inheritance and control who can see that item that's submitted. Some examples, again, just mentioned using item level permissions, or could also apply to list level permissions for the breaking of inheritance. And we can use this when applying permissions to the portal site that's related to our NITRO applications. All right, so we'll get right into the demo here. So let me exit out of this and go to our site. So I'm going to use our help desk site. I usually like to use our help desk site for showing the different things that would go on within here. So within the NITRO applications, if you have a NITRO application, this administration link will get you to where the site permissions are, but certainly you can get to it through more standard SharePoint ways if you need to. But this administration link is given to usually the owners of the group, which again is that full control permission level. But what I'll show you here is that you can go into administration. It'll bring up the options available, and we have the permissions link here. And then you can go to site permissions. Now here you can see who has access to what. We have a couple of extra permissions in here, but you can see the members have edit, the owners have full control, and the visitors have read. So owners are usually the folks who are going to be administering programs, changing forms, working with us to make changes, create new workflows. That's typically what your owners group is going to do. And for that, a lot of that work, they're going to need that full control permission level, which gives them access, again, to everything within the context of that site. Members are given the edit control out of the box, which I mentioned earlier is very close to the full control permission. So you likely are going to want to change that. And members typically refers to, in the sense of a help desk scenario, folks who are going to be working the tickets, your help desk technicians who are going to be managing the tickets, updating tickets, creating resolutions, maybe sending emails to end users, updating the work log. They're going to need to edit those, but there's a different permission level called contribute, and we're going to talk about creating a custom permission level called contribute without delete. That's typically going to be best for your help desk technicians, or if it's a purchase request scenario, you might have that apply to all your users and have a portal scenario. We'll talk about all that. But you might want to change that permission level for your members, but they're given edit by default. And then your visitors are given read access by default. So again, this is just when the site collection is created. These three groups are created, and they're given these default permissions. So you're going to want to change that, especially in the scenarios where your visitors are your end users for submitting help desk tickets. In order to do so, they're going to need to be able to at least contribute or write to that list of help desk tickets. And I'll walk through the different permission options that are available in the permission levels. But you'll see there's an option to add items, update items, delete items. And again, I mentioned that contribute without delete permission level, custom permission level. We'll want to create that and give that at least to our members, if not also the visitors, so that they're not deleting things unnecessarily. And because a lot of these are coming from the root site, what you can do is also, when you break inheritance, perhaps you can create your own permission levels for the actual specific site that you're working with. So let's say we're looking at NITRO Workshops members, NITRO Workshops owners, and you can see up here from the URL we talked about earlier, this is your site collection level. So these permissions are coming from the site collection level. And you can see right here, it says that this website inherits permissions from its parent. Now we may want to go ahead and create our own permission levels for NITRO Help Desk, because there may be other sites in here. And in this particular NITRO Workshops, I have a ton of different sites that I use for demo purposes, and it makes sense to have different permission groups for each of those sites. So I want to break inheritance from the top level. So wherever you are, whether it's on an item or a site within, a subsite within the site collection, you're going to see these options at the top, where if you're inheriting permissions, you can go and manage the parent. But if you're wanting to break inheritance, if it's already inheriting permissions, you can stop that inheritance. So let me show you what that looks like. So typically, if you want to stop inheritance, you can click that stop inheriting permissions. And we're going to hit OK for creating the unique permission levels. And then we can give it a different name. So I'm just going to get rid of this V because it didn't pull in the 2 for some reason. But I'm going to create a new group called NITRO Help Desk Visitors, NITRO Help Desk Members, and NITRO Help Desk Owners. And it's going to use me as the default owner for those, which is fine. That's what I want. Since I'm full control, site collection administrator, I can go ahead and do this. And I'll click OK. Now what this is going to do, it's going to bring me back to the homepage here. So I'll have to go back over to administration, permissions, go back to site permissions. So one thing to note in the URL, you can use this link directly to get to the advanced permissions. You can also go through, if you get to the gearbox over here, you can also go through here to get to site settings and site permissions. So a couple different ways to get to it is you can use this layouts 15 user.aspx, or you can go through site settings if you don't have NITRO application in that, or that administration page you have doesn't have that information in it. Now what you see happen here is that we created new permission groups for, or SharePoint groups, I should say. These are SharePoint groups for Help Desk members, Help Desk owners, Help Desk visitors, but it also retained the what we were inheriting previously, which was the members, owners, and visitors from the workshops level. Now I can go ahead and remove those permissions. So any of the groups that you have in here, you can go ahead and remove permissions. You can see you also have the option to edit user permissions. But we're going to go ahead and remove that so that we can have our specific unique permission groups or SharePoint groups for this site, which is specific to our help desk site. So we're going to have our help desk site here. And then if we want to go ahead and add people to the owners group or to the members group, we can edit each one of those. So to add to SharePoint group is very easy. Just go to the SharePoint group itself, click on it, and you'll have some options here at the top. So we can add users to the group. We can remove users from the group if we select them, and some other options, for group permissions, and we can change those permissions, but we'll do that in a different way in just a moment. So for now, I'm going to add users to this group. I'm not going to send them an email invitation. So you do have that option when you add users to a group to send them an email to let them know that they've been added to that group. But what we're going to do is add, one of our colleagues here, I'm just going to use Eric Demos and share it. Simple as that. Now I've added that group. Similarly, you can add Active Directory groups, or you can add SharePoint groups as well. You can even add the SharePoint groups. So if I do NITRO Workshops, I believe I can pull up the NITRO Workshop members or potentially other SharePoint groups. So you can actually embed SharePoint groups within SharePoint groups. I don't necessarily recommend it, but you can do it if you want to. But then if you have any Active Directory groups, which I can't think of any off the top of my head, you can add those through this way as well. So now you add your users to the group, and now you can go and add your specific permission levels if you want. So you might want to add your permission levels first before you start adding users, up to you, depending on what level of permission that you want them to have. So 2 different ways to create your own custom permission levels. if you've broken inheritance on the site level, you can see we're at the site level here, you'll see the permission levels option. And what it'll do is show you what permissions levels are available for the site, but you still have to go to the top level site to create new ones. So all the permission levels are actually coming from the site collection level. And so what we need to do is go back up to the site collection. Now, an easy way to do that, if you have the access to do so, is to simply remove the subsite information from the URL. We can just go ahead and say, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to keep the layouts 15 user.aspx, hit OK. And now this brings me to the top level site collection settings where you can see our workshops, owners, members, and visitors. And then we also have the permission levels option up here. From the top level, you can also do manage your site collection administrators. But we're going to go over to permission levels. And once this comes up, now you can see you have an option. There's a select box, but it doesn't show up for these 5 because these 5 are what SharePoint gives you out of the box. These are the 5 default permission levels that SharePoint gives to you. I don't recommend deleting them. I don't recommend editing them, but you can create your own permission levels and edit those. So that's what I would recommend. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and create a copy of the contribute permission level. Now, if we go into this, you'll see that there is a possibility we can edit this one. Don't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't recommend doing it. Go all the way to the bottom and copy that permission level. So you see the copy permission level box right here. Click that. It's going to take all those check boxes that are already checked, check them over here in a new form. You see they're all checked already for you. And you can give it a new name. So this is going to be our contribute without delete. You see I've already entered that previously. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that contribute without delete. And the without delete part is important because you want to get rid of the delete items option where they cannot delete your SharePoint items. And also versions. If you have version control enabled, you're going to want to get rid, make sure that your users aren't deleting old versions of tickets. Now you could go through this and add or delete other things that you want. Pages are probably going to be important to view. I haven't gone through these in all detail to understand how they work, but essentially the deleting of the items and deleting the versions, those are the key ones you're going to want to remove for your users, especially your end users and probably your members as well. So just go ahead and create. So once you've got it all set, we hit create. Now you see contribute without delete is an option. We can go and delete it if it doesn't look good. If you want to go ahead and try again, create a new permission level, go ahead. But right now it's there for your use. And I usually recommend having a description. I didn't do it this time, but you can, usually add a description so that anyone in the future knows what that permission level was created for. Now we can go back to our help desk and go to that's just going to go through the back channels. Let's go back here, refresh this, make sure it picks up the change. And then I can choose my help desk members and edit those user permissions. Now when I go and edit those user permissions, I should now see the option for contribute without delete, which is what I just created at the top level. So even though it's only at the top level, it filters through. Even though inheritance is broken, it's still pulling those permissions across down into the subsite level. So now I can do the contribute without delete. I'm not going to give any other permission to this group and hit OK. And now you can see there's that contribute without delete option applied to that group. One thing to mention that I think is important here is the manage website permission. So when creating your custom permission levels, you notice that the full control group, actually, let me go back a second here. Let me back up to the top level again. And permission levels. You'll notice that the full control has everything. I mean, it's going to have everything that's by default. It's going to have everything checked off. But the important thing to note here is the manage website permission. Now you can add this to any other permission level if you want, but this is the key permission level for accessing and editing NITRO features specifically. So if you want to create NITRO forms, if you want to edit NITRO forms, if you want to create NITRO workflows, if you want to create or edit custom actions, the manage website permission is typically the key permission level needed to access those resources. So again, you can add that to any permission level you want. If you wanted to give someone contribute without delete, let's say you have a group of users, you want to give them all contribute without delete. You could even create your own permission level that is just manage website. And then if you wanted to, you can you can pick and choose who that permission level goes to. So you can say, let's use this for example. Let's go ahead and I'm going to cancel that. So I don't want to uncheck a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to edit my read permission level and copy that. And I'm just going to call it manage website. So what I can do is uncheck everything. You see other things are reliant on access. You see manage websites. If I manage website automatically gives permission to other things like adding, customizing pages, which is kind of what you're doing with NITRO forms and NITRO workflows, etc. And you can kind of see what it, we'll see what it does by default, right? So let's uncheck all this stuff and click on manage website. You can see it by default gives access to these other things. Those are required. So if I uncheck any of these, it's going to remove that manage website permission. So along with manage website permission, you're going to need to give your user access to these other things to do the things they need to do. So let's go ahead and create that. So now we have that manage website permission. I'm going to go back to my help desk V2 level. Now let's say I have a particular user I want to grant permissions to. I want to grant manage website. They may already be in the members group. They may already be in the visitors group. Owners group will have the manage website permission by default, but if the person's not in owners and they're members or visitors, but you want to elevate their particular permission, you can go ahead and do this. You can go to your grant permissions link and choose the user. Let's say, choose Scott Restivo. I'm going to choose him as the person who gets that particular option. So now you have all the options. You can put them into the same permission level as members, owners, visitors, and then all the other options are available there as well. We can just give them manage website specifically. And let's go here and add them just to complete the cycle here. So what's going to happen here is that this user, Scott Restivo, has access through the members group. And as you recall, the members group has contribute without delete. But then also we've gone ahead and proactively given that user access for managing permissions or managing website permissions. So in addition to what they get through the members group contribute without delete, they're going to also get those permissions for manage website. So that way it gives you a way to directly give access to particular users, the ability to modify NITRO, update NITRO on an ongoing or temporary basis without giving them access to other things that they might not need access to. But you can also create a group, and let's say we want to create a group called Manage NITRO. We could create a group called Manage NITRO. I'm going to leave myself as the owner. We have the option to see who has membership, who can see the membership of the group. Let's say everyone can see it, but only group owners can edit the membership. We're not going to allow requests to leave or join. We're not going to auto accept requests. We're going to give them manage website by default, and we'll create that. So just in a few clicks, we've created this manage NITRO permission group, and then now we can go ahead and add users to that. So if you wanted to manage things through groups, which is typically the recommended way to do it, you would add your users as many as you need. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be as many, 5, however many you want, into the manage NITRO group. And then if we go back to our permissions here, let me refresh this. You see there's our manage NITRO group. I can actually, since he's already, Scott Restivo is already in that manage NITRO group, I can remove their permissions here. So that's important to note. It's just going to remove his permissions here. It doesn't mean he gets removed from manage NITRO as well. So you see he's still in the manage NITRO group. So you can delete the user directly and remove their permissions directly. As long as they're in another group, they're going to have access to that. So another thing, kind of important to note here is the ability to check permissions. So this is another thing you can take a look at if you're having trouble understanding how does a user have access to the thing that they have access to, like what's going on there. You can type in their name into this check permissions. You click the check permissions, go over here, go to check now, and you can see what they're given access to. You can see he is in the contribute without delete group, and he's in the manage website group. And these are the permission levels, and these are the groups that are given that permission level. So it gives you a way to see like how that user is accessing the things that they maybe they shouldn't have access to. Someone granted them permission, or you added them to a group and forgot you did so. Whatever the case may be, you have that check permissions option to go and see what that person has access to. So I mentioned that this setting, this page that you're looking at right now, is specific to a site, of course, but this same permission page can be looked at from the list level and from the item level. So let's show you what that looks like. So if I go to a ticket, or since we're in our help desk ticketing system, and go to one of my tickets here, it's going to take a moment to come up. There's going to be a way for me to get to the permission screen for this item specifically. So for your lists, for your items, there's going to be a way to see the information for this item specifically. I don't think I have. I may not. So you may not have that option directly here, but all right. In the list settings, let me go to list settings actually. So let me go to administration, configure lists. Let's go to tickets list. So on each list in library, you're going to have permissions for this list. So let's go to that, and you'll see it's very similar to what you get from the site level. If not as many options up here, of course, but you're going to see that where it's inheriting its permissions from, or whether it has unique permissions. And if you have lists and libraries in your site that you don't want users to have access to, you can break inheritance on specific lists and give access only to those who need it. So that might be useful for the knowledge base, perhaps, if you only want your back-end users to see that knowledge base and not the end users. You could break inheritance and just hide that knowledge base completely from your end users. Other scenarios might be that there's other lists within the help desk site, and that the user might need access to, but there's others that they don't. So you can break inheritance on the ones that they absolutely don't need access to and give unique permissions. So for something like this, the tickets list, clearly you want to give access to the members, visitors, owners, but maybe the manage NITRO group, you don't need maintenance and redirect group. I'm not sure where those came from. Those are kind of just default. We can remove those. And in that way, now we've created unique permissions for this list of the tickets list. Now, don't worry if you've done that and you're like, oh, shoot, that's not what I wanted to do, or I messed it up. I want to go back and start from scratch. You have a delete unique permissions option, so you can just go ahead and click that. It's going to re-inherit those permissions. So any changes you made at that site level or list level or item level are going to be overwritten and refer back to the parent site, and it's just going to start inheriting again. So basically deleting whatever unique permissions you might have had and re-inheriting permissions from the top level. So that's not going to hurt anything to keep doing that, if you want to keep going back and forth on that. It's just a matter of what you're working with and how sensitive the information is how you want to manage it and how closely you want to control that access. So you can manage it from the list level manually. You can manage it from the site level manually. Now, I did also mention on the earlier about item level permissions. You might want to set criteria for applying item level permissions to particular items, like in an HR type scenario, perhaps. That can be done through NITRO workflows. So if we go back to our administration and go to NITRO apps, NITRO workflows, however you get to it, there is an option within NITRO workflows to manage permissions. And I'm going to create a new one here. I'm going to go onto the tickets list. I'm going to use designer. I'm going to do it when an item is created. And we can do it when an item is modified as well. because you might want to use information from that ticket to determine who should have access to what. So if we look at our list of options in the NITRO workflow actions, we have the manage permissions option. So this is going to apply at the item level. And give it some name like break inheritance, and give access to owners and let's see, members and requester only. So we're going to run it on the current item. When an item is added, we're going to grant user permissions. So we're not going to copy permissions. So the thing is, if we grant user permissions, it's going to break inheritance by default. And then we can directly copy, directly give permissions to it, and probably from a contribute without delete standpoint, and give access to users and groups. Let's say it's going to be owners, search NITRO workshop owners, and let's say it's going to be the, let's hit OK on that, and then the requester. Oops. All right, hold on a second. Let me go back. Users and groups, owners, search. All right, make sure you have the right radio button selected, like I didn't last time, and then you're good to go. And then like requester here. So this is, just an example of what is possible with the breaking inheritance and managing permissions directly with items based on some criteria, based on some conditions. So even within this, you can create some conditions around it. You can create the gateways. You can use the gateways in workflows. You can use the conditions in workflows to determine which path it's going to go down, what kind of access it's going to give, things like that. So you can manage it in that way through workflows directly, so that you can manage who has access to what more granularly across documents, across libraries. So it gives you a nice way to control who sees what within your site. And then I also want to talk about, I'm not going to save that. I want to talk about the portal permissions. So not every, users of users of NITRO in general usually don't have a portal scenario, but let's say you create a portal, you could do that. That's fine. If you're using our help desk, you probably have a portal already. If you're using our purchase request, you might have a portal already. But what you want to do is manage who has access to the portal and who has access to the backend. So slightly different from SharePoint permissions, because I mentioned earlier, if you're using the NITRO help desk, your members group, which are your end users, your visitors group, is going to need access to create help desk items in the backend. So we're at this help desk v2, and underneath this we have a portal. Of course. All right, let me get to it more directly. Hang on here. I thought it was just portal, but I think it's, yeah, here it is. Let me open that link in a new tab. Yeah, help desk v2 portal. Okay. So we have a portal site. So again, it's under that subsite. We can break inheritance if we need to. But at some level, the members group, whether it's here or at NITRO Help Desk v2, they're going to need access to the tickets list, which lives at this subsite level. Now, it's a little bit counterintuitive because you don't generally want to give access to that subsite from your end users, right? You just want them to be able to submit a ticket and see the tickets that they've submitted, maybe update those tickets, search the knowledge base, et cetera. But the way SharePoint works, unfortunately, you do have to give some level of permission to your visitors group to that backend help desk site. But the way we can control that and control that access is through the site settings of NITRO. Now, again, we can have that in our administration page under permissions, the other one we have here, the NITRO security settings. So we talk about the site permissions and the different things you can do there. So we're going to talk about the NITRO security settings now. And the NITRO security settings allow you to to say that this group of people should have access to usually it's like this group of people should have access to the backend site and everyone else gets sent to the portal. So the way we would set that is that we're going to say that our backend site is the help desk v2. So that's the root site. That's where the core of the help desk lives. The core of the application lives on that help desk site. but we're going to want to send them to the portal page. So I have that portal page open over here. I can just select this URL by triple clicking, Control C, go to NITRO configurations, add that in. So the target URL is what the site is that they're going to be redirected to if they try to access this. So then that's with this allow group members to access site. That's probably the most clear-cut way to set this up, is that you have users who are members of one or more of the specified groups down here will be able to access the selected site, which is up here, and will not be redirected. All the users will be redirected to the target URL, which is here. So just kind of walk through that. I know it can be a little bit confusing, but that's what we're talking about. The groups specified here will be able to access the selected site here, and will, all others will be redirected to the target URL. So basically what we're saying is that we can identify the members group, which is, NITRO help desk, see if it comes up. Yeah, NITRO help desk members, and we can say NITRO help desk owners. So now what we're saying is these two groups specifically, whoever's in those two groups, whether in an AD group embedded in these groups with the AD API permission enabled, or directly added to these groups, they'll be able to access the backend site, and anyone who is not in these groups will be going to the portal. So I recommend this option because a lot of times your visitors group will include everyone. You don't want to go through and specifically say every user in your organization, whether it could be 1,000, could be 2,000, depending on the number of users you have, 10,000 perhaps. You don't want to specify each one of those individuals or all the various Active Directory groups they could be part of in this setting here. So you're basically just saying we have a limited set of users who are part of the members group and part of the owners group who will get access to the backend site. Everyone else, regardless of what group they're in or whether they're in a group or not, assuming they'll have access to the portal at some level, at least read-only, they're going to get redirected to the target URL of the portal, and only these users in these two groups will get access to the backend. All right. I want to just really kind of hammer home that point because I know it can be a little bit confusing and hard to remember exactly what's what, but this is the way I recommend setting this up, is that you have limited users who go to the backend and everyone else gets sent to the portal. So that's going to be a redirect. They'll get sent to the portal. They can then submit their tickets. And that's one of the reasons we recommend item level permissions is, theoretically that user does have access to the tickets in the back end, but if you use item level permissions, then they're only going to see the tickets that they have submitted and none others. So again, that's really important for HR scenarios or other scenarios where sensitive data might be being controlled or accessed through the back end. You want to control who has access to that information. So, all right, so didn't quite use the full hour, but that's kind of the content I wanted to cover now. And certainly if you have any questions or anything else that I didn't cover, you want to ask about, certainly go ahead and go put that in. We did have one question come in. So the question is, what's the effect of changing the permissions via the share button? I've noticed when creating new groups, they seem to by default have access to edit the page itself, which has been an issue. Oh, that's a good question. So I might have to dig into this one a little more granularly. So the idea, so what you're saying is that if you go to let's go back over here. Let's go here, go home. And we go to a specific ticket. We might not have the share option here because I think we're blocking a lot of the standard SharePoint stuff. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see the share button here. Let me go back up a level. Kind of see what you're talking about. All right. So you're saying on an item, so like an item like let's see. Let's go to issue tracker. Oh geez, it's doing that silly Microsoft lists thing. Okay. Well, anyway, that might be okay. All right, I'm not seeing that share button out here. So you know what, Heather, I'll go ahead and follow up with you on that question as I dig into it, because I'll need to look at that one specifically about using the share button. So maybe you can just pop into the chat or to the question box, where are you seeing that share button? Is it on item specifically, or is it on the site level, or is it on the list level? And then I can kind of dig into that in a little more detail. All right, any other questions or anything else that anyone had to ask about the permissions, or anything we didn't cover that you'd like to revisit? All right, looks like someone raised their hand. James, if you still have a question, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You can unmute yourself and ask the question if you'd like.
Can't you turn to share the entire site so that it doesn't allow to share files? I think you can. If you go to the root of the settings, there's a share. You can say don't allow your users to share items. I'm pretty sure you can
I
turn
see what
that
you're
off.
saying. So point me to that so I can share it with the group.
You go to the permissions for the whole site. I don't see it on this. I think you have to go to the
Yeah, I
root.
don't.
Is it the root?
Yeah, it is. All right, let me go back to here.
You should have the permissions. Yeah, be your root site permissions, and then access request settings.
Access request settings, yes.
And then I think the very first one says don't allow them to share.
There you go. That's a good point. Thank you for
And
pointing
then
that
they
out,
can't.
James.
Yeah, they can't do it at all then.
All right, and I apologize if you guys are getting background. The groundskeepers decided to mow at this exact moment right outside my window. Hopefully you don't hear that, but you allow members to share the site individual files and folders. So yeah, that's a great point. And another thing that you can access from the root site is that you can disallow your members to share or invite other users to the group. So that gives you another way to make sure the people who that you're controlling the access, and you're not allowing your users who otherwise have access to share things that they're not supposed to. So that's a really great point. The access requesting as well as here, so you could even allow access requests, and there's a way to manage those requests and see who's requested access. So you can do that. So can this only be done at the root? I believe that it can only be done at the root, Samantha. That's kind of, I believe, what we're looking at here. Let me go back up a level, and well, look at that. All right, good. We're all learning something here. At the site collection level, or sub-site level 2, you can also have that same setting for access requesting. So there you go, Samantha. If you need to control that access at the site level, you can do that. So again, it comes down to that inheritance and things being broken across the board there. If you're wanting to disallow it at a specific site level, you have that option. If you want to disallow it for the whole site collection, you can do that as well. So another little piece of tidbit of information to help you control who has access to what and who's sharing what out with the world at large. So that gives you a little more control. Now you will see we have lock down the sites in the sense that from a typical NITRO form, you don't have that share option. You might still be able to get to it from the site level, but from a specific item, you don't have that share option. But if you're getting to that item outside of it, or actually, let me take a look. You might have that option here, or not given it here. Let me go to the site. Actually, just do a quick test. Now we're going to build off script here, so I apologize a little bit. Let me go to our site contents. And so I'm just trying to get back to the standard SharePoint list view, which should give you the option to share. It's going to take a minute to come up. All right, just give that moment to Okay, yeah. So you can see the share option appears here in the standard standard SharePoint list view. In a NITRO list view, you don't have that option. So if you're giving your users access to only just the NITRO list views, you should be fine. But you can see this does give you an option, a way to share it. But as we talked about, this setting here should allow or disallow for that option. So if you turn that off, that share option should go away. We can actually try that. Let's see, refresh that, refresh this. It might take a minute to, you might still see the share option here because it might take a minute to come through, but it does still allow you to share. But so that's something to play around with and test with, and certainly write back if you have some issues with that or ways that's not working. We can take a look at it, maybe look through the Microsoft documentation and try to figure it out together as far as how to prevent that. But just another level of protection for your data, another level of managing who has access to what. All right, great. Well, thank you for the questions and the comments. I do appreciate all of that. And I think unless there's any other questions, I think we're pretty much good to go here. Certainly, if anything, having follow up or anything that comes up after the fact, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you have any follow up questions, reach out to us. Let me actually go back to this here. Yeah, here you go. So if you have any questions, we're always available. You can contact us at support@crocanyon.com or hello@crocanyon.com, which is here. You can also give us a call and go through the support line to get answers to questions you might have. But if you're, have any follow-up, let me know. Chris, anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, James, for walking us through all of this. I know I certainly learned a lot.
Good. All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it, and hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.